Yeah, no, that's good. Cool.
So yeah, so actually going to switch the order. So Camp Smalltalk Supreme went quite well. It was nice to have a third kind of venue, along with the FAST and the UKSTUG venues. It was nice to have a third. Unfortunately, several people were unable to get in because of Canadian immigration. Sorry, Juan. And a few other people. But anyway, it was what it was. So it was pretty good. It wasn't an academic conference the way I would necessarily think of these, but there was a bit of academic perspective, and it went well. So I put a link in the document, and somebody else put a link in the chat earlier to the web pages, or the YouTube videos from it. They're all there. The only problem, I think, is Adele's. There was a mic problem the first couple minutes of her talk, but it was a great talk, and as were many of the others. There was some really interesting stuff.
Thank you for recording those and making them available. I've started to watch a few. They're great.
Yeah. I particularly point you to Offray's presentations. I thought they were really interesting, and there were several others that were pretty interesting as well. So the organizer of that, Richard Eng, and I are wondering whether it makes sense to try and do this again next year with perhaps a more academic conference. And so I'm looking for people who might be willing to serve on the program committee for this. We might make it a sort of a standard North American Smalltalk conference, paralleling the Argentinian one and the European one. So looking for anybody that might be willing to serve on a program committee for that. Don't have to be an academic, but having some academics on that would be excellent. But there are many people on this call who I think would be quite able to do that, even if they don't have necessarily academic associations. So definitely interested in that. So send me an email, dmason@ryerson.ca is the address, and I'd love to hear from anybody who's willing to do that.
And I guess if anyone's watching sort of in the weeks after when this goes live, same thing applies.
Yep, absolutely. We're trying to figure out whether it makes sense and whether we can pull it together. So
was there a lot of academic interest at the conference that, you know, from those that were there? Was there sort of a good mix of students and casual interest?
No, there were very few people. In fact, I'm not sure there were any local students that showed up, which was a surprise to Richard. He expected, you know, there was going to be a flood of people walking in, which there wasn't. So it was largely people like you would see here. And people very interested in Smalltalk, but not necessarily from an academic perspective.
And it's a good reason maybe to make one, right? So maybe we can get a little bit of energy. You know, certainly our friends in Argentina seem to do a good job of getting that kind of grass level root support.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dave, would you type it into the chat when you get a chance?
Sorry, I'll put it in the chat after I finish. So the next piece is really just a what's the word? It's just to maybe encourage you to come back for the September meeting, where I will be giving the presentation that I was supposed to be giving today, and I'm going to be talking about a Smalltalk environment that I'm building that I'm calling ZAG, because it's built using an underlying, so it doesn't use Smalltalk as the source for it, and like the open Smalltalk VM does, but instead it's implemented in a language called Zig, which is a C replacement, a very cool language. And so it's Zag seemed like an obvious name to go with Zig. But as I've been working on it, I've actually realized that it's actually a kind of a dynamic programming language toolkit that I'm building, because it has a garbage collector, it has definitions for immediate objects and heap objects. It has dispatch, so if it's an object-oriented language like Python or Ruby, it would be very easy to use that dispatch. It has a very easy model to compile to, so it's so basically you could take it, add a Ruby or a Python parser to it, with a little bit of runtime, and you'd have an implementation of dynamic languages. And part of the rationale for why I think it's worth talking about this is, as some of you may be aware, Haskell was the result of statically typed programming language people being frustrated that they were, somebody would create a project, Miranda as an example, but it was commercial, it wasn't available for other people to work on. And so they got together and a committee of people basically designed this environment that that has been extremely useful for them, because the Haskell that they were talking about in the mid-'80s was a much smaller language than Haskell today, and they've added a lot of really cool features to Haskell over the years because they've had this common platform that they've all been working on. And so that's kind of what I'm thinking of for this as a dynamic language pluggable runtime, is that you could have researchers in Python or Smalltalk or Ruby or other dynamic languages. Lisp would be certainly, haven't quite figured out how to do call with current continuation, but apart from that, writing a scheme interpreter using it would be fairly straightforward. So anyway, so that's kind of the idea behind it, and I'll talk more about it in the September meeting. Happy to take any questions that anybody has right now.
Any questions?
I would like to suggest you to check out the Lambda project. They have
Sorry.
okay, I will write you in a okay. So they have several YouTube videos where they have this type inference, and they have projection structural editor, and they suggest when you have a structural editor, you can actually make better type, stronger type language than Haskell, because you have a runtime checks, like in not like runtime, but ID time checks, and it's very cool. So I will post a link in the chat so you can check.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Yeah, I have a PhD student who's working on type inference for Smalltalk, and that would be part of the system as well. So yeah, so it would have type inference. And I have some ideas that I'm working on that I believe are going to produce a very high performance Smalltalk environment, but we'll have to see once it's there. But I'm expecting it to be faster than most, if not all, Smalltalks. Even though the initial version at least will not have a JIT, but I still think it's going to turn out to be faster than many other languages. Peter or Petero?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yep, great. So Dave, I've been following Pharo.js and wondering how, if at all, it's going to progress from here, and integration with Zag. And the third question, your performance Smalltalk you just mentioned, any chance there'll be multiple threads or CPUs supported?
Yeah, so Sorry, I'm not sure about the first question. The second question about Pharaoh.js. Pharaoh.js, Nori and I are working on it still. We're just about, it's ready to run on Pharaoh 10, except that Pharaoh has just completely changed the playground. So we're writing the new playground interaction or interconnection. So that will be, should be ready. Hopefully we'll be able to demonstrate that at UKSTUG the end of August. That's our target timeline for that. Will it work with Zag Smalltalk? I don't know. So Zag Smalltalk, because it's a new Smalltalk, it will take a bit of time to turn it into an image-based Smalltalk. Initially, it will be a you debug some kind of like Pharaoh.js in a way. You debug something in Pharaoh or Squeak, and then you could export something that would compile to run on Zag. And the third question about performance and threads, absolutely. This is being designed from the ground up to support operating system threads. So it will be, you'll be able to have, if you've got a recent Apple hardware, you'll be able to have 16 CPU threads running simultaneously in the image. So it has a garbage collector that supports that as well. And also, there's also some other interesting properties of the garbage collector.
That's awesome. What's your timeline on that performance?
I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to give some performance data at the September talk. That's kind of my hope. And then I'm actually thinking of Quis or Glamorous Toolkit as being the UI side to put on it. I'm looking for something smaller rather than larger, so that's why I'm thinking Quis. But I haven't talked to Juan about that, so maybe harder than I expect. I don't know. We'll see.
Thanks.
I am willing to help.
Great. Offrey, you had a question. You had a question, but you were unable to unmute yourself. Can you unmute yourself now?
Okay. No, I just want to say that if you want to discuss using a quiz for your project and how we can help you, that would be great.
Great. Okay. Definitely do that. Thank you. Francisco.
Yeah, so my question is about, so if you store the AST, it means that you won't be storing or needing the bytecodes for each compile method, and you can interpret directly by interpreting the AST and then using that same to do the just-in-time compilation.
Yes.
Is that the idea?
So there will not be bytecode. It's actually going to use, as a first cut, a threaded interpreter. I'm not sure how many people are familiar with the threaded interpreter, but basically the method is a sequence of addresses of methods that get called, or of functions, Zig functions that get called. So this is used by
is that Forth?
That uses that? Yeah, Forth. Forth uses this and gets pretty good performance out of it. And so I have some ideas about sort of a generalized inlining approach that I think is going to produce methods that are will be threaded but will execute it at high speed.
Let me just mention that Squeak at one point had a threaded-based JIT by Ian Piomarta. So he implemented 3 different JITs for Squeak, and the first one was a threaded code.
Okay.
So
cool. Okay. That's something I should definitely note. Okay.
Yeah, that was back around.
Probably before Squeak 4.0, like that.
Yeah. The big problem there is that it was actually slower than the interpreter because of some deep mistake he had made.
Yeah.
And it in turn was inspired by an older project. I think, was it by Elliot Miranda? I forgot the name. So there was an older Smalltalk that uses threaded code as well. That was the inspiration.
Yeah, Elliot did a threaded version of Brouhaha way back in the probably around 1990.
Interesting. Okay.
Right. Are we
Anything
ready
else,
to move on?
Offrey had a question, I think, and I'm not sure whether Francesco had any other
yeah.
question.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Offrey.
Okay.
Yes.
So Dave, regarding the academical committee that you are talking about, I mean, what else will be needed? Like how many people? And because I am like really interested in this happening next year again.
Okay.
I think that is important to have like these kind of, let's say, 3 places like the States, Europe, and Latin America.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. So if that's the biggest hurdle at the moment, is getting a program committee that is reasonable. So it probably means 8 to 10 people.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And after that, it's like almost done. I mean, like, do you have like the support from the university to do this again? It's just like the main issue is having the committee. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, the main issue is the content, the committee and content, not the university. The university will certainly support it.
Okay.
Cool.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Right, Offrey. Oh, go on.
I just say that the name reminds me a little bit about Ted Nelson's zigzag spreadsheet thing. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
No.
So if you Google for Ted Nelson zigzag, then you find that's one of his famous projects besides Xanadu.
Okay. Thank you.
Interesting.